Okay, thank you. So yes, I'm Linda, and I'm in Shipston on Stour, or near Shipston on Stour, and also Morton in the Marsh in Warwickshire. And I'm a psychotherapeutic counsellor, coach, a facilitator, and a climate psychologist. And I've been working in the area of climate psychology. I'm not a chartered psychologist. There are lots of different um, versions of that, but I'm working mostly with people around climate change, eco anxiety, and those kind of things. Working in organisations. Hey Jennifer, nice to see you. And so great to see you. And so I got first involved in understanding a lot more about climate around 6, 7 years ago when Extinction Rebellion came to the fore, and so since then I've been taking a very deep dive into it. So for this session, we're going to talk about eco-anxiety, eco-distress, and look at some strategies that companies and individuals can use. And I'll look a little bit at the climate psychology as well. So according to Graham's instructions, which are very helpful, we've got a little bit of just an opening, and then I'll do a presentation of around about probably 20 minutes with some slides, and then time for talk and conversation. And I'm happy to stay on a bit afterwards if anybody wants to talk, and I'll be signposting some resources at the end. So I'll kick off. So thank you all for giving your time here. So I'm just going to check that I can share the slides. And let me share my slides. So I'm going to go first of all here.
Good.
So this is so what I do is I said I work with leaders and I work with organisations and individuals to help them to develop cultures that care for a rapidly changing world. And I'm also a board member of the Climate Psychology Alliance, and I'm responsible for the growth and the delivery of climate cafe listening circles, amongst other things. I'm involved in several projects, so that's a volunteer role. So we're going to talk about strategies and emotional anxiety. So that's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover what it is and what it's not. I'm going to give a very brief introduction to climate psychology because that's, I think, important to know as to how we are here in a way. And some strategies. I'll take a head, heart and hands approach. And this talk may not be easy for everybody. I do aim to leave you feeling informed and equipped, but I'm going to take it slowly in parts because there is some new information that people can find hard. We're dealing with difficult times. So my first question really is, are we living in an as-if world a lot of the time? Here you can see some artificial grass cleaner that smells like freshly grown grass. So not only are we creating a world where we've got fake grass, we're creating cleaner that smells like the real thing in a company bottle called Ecofective. So I want just to leave that with you, that idea that we're living in a world full of as if. So behind the phrase climate change, because we talk about climate change quite glibly often, behind the phrase is quite a lot of stuff going on. It's a catch-all term often for global heating and extreme weather events, ecological and biodiversity damage and loss, and systemic pollution and much more. It does impact those who are most disadvantaged and vulnerable already, by whatever means that is: race, class, age, sex, education, socioeconomic status, mental health. It is a social justice issue. It's rooted in and is symptomatic of deep and wide systemic malaise, inequality, rooted in this particular era in colonialism and some would say neoliberal entitlement. And it impacts those who've done the least to cause it. And it impacts all species, human and non-human life forms. And some people are now saying climate change isn't really a great term. It's meta-crisis, omni-crisis, poly-crisis. This morning we've got Trump crisis. So there's lots of different ways to describe it, but I want to just put that there in terms of the context, because I think that helps us to understand some of the anxiety that we're seeing. So, of course, the reality behind this as-if world of everything's fine is actually we've got increasing forest fires around the world. We've got floods around the world. They've been happening for years. And now we're hearing much more. This was from COP26 in Glasgow. This was the paper on the day. climate crisis on your doorstep. So it's coming closer and we're not able to look away so much anymore. And this was Vauxhall Elms a couple of years ago. And of course, we've seen much worse flooding. So this is the context of what we're seeing. And we're also hearing more and more reports about biodiversity loss. So 73% is a stark figure, and this was a Living Planet report out last month, that it took 76 million years to build our biodiversity, and yet wildlife populations are globally down by an average of 73% in the last 50 years. If we think of that time frame as 24 hours, we destroyed 3/4 of the rest of life in the last 0.06 seconds. So you can see from these kind of figures that there are some serious things happening in the world. And of course, we're way off track addressing it. We passed a safe level of CO2 in the late 90s. Banks are still financing fossil fuels at the time of this chart to the tune of $3.8 trillion, despite all lots of global agreements. So this is the context for why people are anxious. So what is this term eco-anxiety? Well, briefly, one could say it's just being deeply affected by feelings of loss and helplessness and frustration linked to a sense of inability to make a difference. And my sense is a lot of people this morning will be feeling that about world events with Trump and other world events, of course. So it's being deeply affected by these feelings of loss and helplessness and that sort of powerlessness around what's happening in the world. Practitioners and scholars are now moving really to the word distress, because anxiety can slightly pathologize something, and it's like an anxiety syndrome, or I've got anxiety. It's a normal response, and it's a heightened emotional, mental, or bodily response into dangerous changes in our climate system. It's actually an inevitable and even healthy response to the ecological threats we're facing. If we weren't having these responses, we would be ignoring the reality of what's going on, and ignoring that reality isn't very good for anybody. And in fact, in the Climate Psychology Alliance Handbook, we say paying heed to what is happening in our communities and across the globe is actually a healthier response than turning away in denial or disavowal. Denial, by the way, is and disavowal, slightly different. Denial is a way of saying, no, it's not, absolutely not happening. It's just not real, it's not true. And here's the evidence that it's not. Disavowal is knowing it's true, but pretending it's not. Sort of knowing and unknowing, not knowing at the same time, and trying to hold both of those in your mind. And it's a regular state that I go into. I like to be in disavowal some days. I'd rather not know what's going on. So some key points about climate and eco-distress. It's not an illness. It's really so important that we stop any newspapers from scaremongering headlines saying, you know, the climate activists are making all these people ill. No, we're just waking them up to reality. So it's understandable, it's healthy. It's not yet fully understood. I've been a counsellor for over 30 years. We're still learning about how it's showing up, what triggers it, which kind of people tend to get it, which kind of people don't, and what phases in our life we get it. So we're not on it at all by any means at all. It's experienced, of course, very differently in different countries and cultures. For some, there's some kickback that say, well, what are you white people doing having anxiety? We've lived with this for years. It's been known by us. Also, I should say about cultures, some cultures don't actually have that term anxiety in the same way, because their loss is often much more deeply entwined with the community and the spirits that live in their community. For example, in the South Pacific, people will regularly speak to their ancestors, and they'll have visions of ancestors. So if they're losing the land, they're losing the place where they're connected with their ancestors. So it's much deeper than just, I'm a bit worried about my future. But it's particularly experienced for those working in earth sciences and conservation, and in young people and children. I do a lot of work with earth scientist people. I've done talks at all sorts of institutions around the world and in London around people who are trying to conserve nature, and their life's work is kind of crumbling sometimes. So it's very hard for them, and in young people and children, because of their fears for the future. So it can range from mild to severe, this level of anxiety, and it can fluctuate on a daily basis. It can be generalised. It can be just a general feeling of dread, or it can be a general feeling on one day. And if you've got pre-existing anxiety, it can, of course, be heightened. It is a dread or fear for the future for yourself or others. I meet grandparents who've got into things like activism because they have a fear for their children's and grandchildren's future. It can lead to a sense of pointlessness and a desire to give up. I've met young people who've stopped university as a result and think, well, there's no point in me getting a degree, or no point in me carrying on with med school. I've met a couple of people from med school who have left. It can lead to a lot of isolation, alienation, isolation, frustration with people who don't get it. And I think isolation is the thing that I hear most of all from people who are living in two worlds. There's one world that gets it, and that's often the world of activism, or they're working in sustainability. And then there's another whole world out there where family and friends aren't getting it and not talking about it. And it can lead to disturbed sleep, distressing dreams, loss of appetite. So if you know anything about anxiety or distress, you'll know that these are fairly common things that happen anyway. But this is triggered specifically by climate. And it can also get a bit manic. You can get really busy, you can get defensive. It's called a manic defense, where you just get busy to distract yourself. You can get into doom scrolling and only looking for bad news, quite intrusive thoughts. It can, however, fuel really meaningful action. It certainly has done for me, and it helps to build support networks because you find like-minded people. It can make you change your behaviours, and it can lead to activism, and that can all be good stuff. But without moderation and resilience building, you can actually burn out from that too. And freeze and denial, saying it's not happening and I'm not being able to do anything, can actually be suppressed anxiety. So that's a sort of whistle-stop tour of climate and eco. So let's look at some of the statistics. This is a recent survey done by the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, of which I'm an accredited member and fellow. And they did a survey earlier this year, and 57% of UK adults say their mental health is affected. And it rises for those who are younger to 63%. And it goes to 73%. Up to 73% for people who've experienced a mental health issue in the last 5 years. Given that 1 in 4 people have a mental health issue, that's a lot of quite worried people walking around. And we go through various phases, and there is you might have known the change curve if you've done any management training from Fisher. So this is done by a colleague of mine, Caroline Hickman, who did the groundbreaking piece of research. And people are less aware, and then they have the kind of awakening. And then they can feel some anxiety, and they can have all sorts of feelings like I've been abandoned and there's no hope, and feel terrified and those kind of things. And it can take people into quite a dark place. And then they find turning points. They find turning points of meeting people, finding others who feel the same way. They feel connected back to nature. So it's a journey. It's not just that it's all one slope. You can come back and up, you can slide up and down this curve and start back again. But these are some of the typical things that people describe. And we can have all sorts of feelings that suddenly feel really, really much more alive. So feeling of love for the planet, feeling of hope and connection, and get inspired and feel determined and courageous and joyful. And this can be really wonderful. And then it can be overshadowed at times by overwhelm and fear and guilt and shut down, don't want to know about it, and anxiety and alarm. And so we can have this kind of strange mishmash of feelings all going on at the same time. And the isolation one, I think, is the one that I hear most of all, as I mentioned earlier on. So in young people, I'll just very briefly touch on a couple of things. I will share this data with you afterwards, by the way. A 2021 survey done by my colleague Caroline Hickman looked at 10,000 young people, and 75% believe the future is frightening, and that rises where there are climate events already happening a lot. More than 50% felt afraid and anxious. Betrayal is a theme that comes through a lot. Nearly 60% said governments were betraying me, and 64% said governments weren't doing enough. nearly half feel ignored or dismissed when they try to talk about it. Now, this is really important, I think, a really important point here. Young people are feeling ignored or dismissed when they try and talk. And 56% think humanity is doomed, and 39% are hesitant to have children. That's 1 in 4 young people are hesitant to have children. I don't remember growing up with this, even though I was born at the time of sort of campaign for nuclear disarmament. It didn't occur to me. And anxiety is significantly related to perceived government inaction at local government and national government level, international government, feelings of betrayal, being dismissed and living in fear for the future. And there's a term for it called moral injury. It's your job to look after me and you've let me down. You're the grown-ups, you're not looking after me. So you can feel, you know, as I say these things, these are quite powerful words. This is how young people are feeling. And for those that may not see the screen, it says, so did the grown-ups all fix climate change in Glasgow? No, not really. Have a good sleep. Click the light off. Sorry. And there's the child left in the dark with their feelings. So some wider impacts on mental health. If you are looking after mental health in your area or you're interested in that field, I think it's useful to know that there are some far-reaching impacts. I'm just going to see someone sent me a message. Yeah, okay. I'll come back to messages at the end, thanks. Far-reaching impacts of climate change. They include increased rates of suicide, risk of dying during a heat wave, particularly if you've got a pre-existing mental illness and you can't get yourself to a place of safety, or you don't realise that, for example, elderly people, or anybody actually with Alzheimer's dementia, often don't realise they're thirsty, so they don't hydrate themselves enough, so they're much more at risk. There's wider impacts of psychological trauma, much more than physical injury at the moment. People are psychologically traumatised by what they see on the news and what they hear. Currently, more than from physical injury, climate impacts. It can cause PTSD, depression, anxiety and extreme distress. And it can disrupt care provision for those with a mental health diagnosis. If you can't physically get to the clinic or your place where you meet your community, for your social care needs to be met, then you're going to really struggle at home, as well as getting all sorts of things, medicines delivered and those kind of things. And so it can cause an exacerbation of existing mental distress. So this was the Grantham Institute, and they actually used words like there's a tsunami of mental health coming our way, and we've neither budgeted for it nor are we equipped for it. So at national and local governmental level. So I'm just going to invite you to take a moment. It's a lot to take in. I'm being quite real here. I'm sharing quite a lot of information that is all in one go. So you might find this challenging, you might find it distressing, or you might actually feel nothing, and that's as valid a response as anything. But take a moment just to pause and reflect and have a look at that lovely lake there. And if you wish to take some slow, deep breaths in and write down or name your feelings if you wish. So Joanna Macy, scholar and active hope philosopher and work that reconnects inventor, says something very, very important 50 years ago. Of all the dangers we face, from climate crisis to nuclear warfare, none is so great as the deadening of our response. So why have we not been responding? Why are we not all talking about it? Why are we not all walking around in a state of shock? And why are young people being ignored and dismissed? So let's look at what's going on behind the scenes maybe. So climate change and everything that goes with it presents us with profound psychological threats. Existential threats, threats to our integrity, our self-identity, to our self-esteem, we think we're good people, to our life plans, what we hope for the future and what we expected, and things we don't even really talk about, but we just assume are going to happen as we get older, and that our life is going to work out in a particular way. These are all massive threats at huge, huge levels that are very hard to bear. And it can lead us to have some quite unbearable feelings. If you've ever tried infant psychology or child psychology, you'll know that children go through developmental phases, and there's quite a lot of terror in their early development, and it can take us back. The threats of climate change can take us back to some quite primitive states. So we can feel loss and grief and guilt and shame and helplessness and really quite some really quite difficult feelings. And so what do you do with those? You can't walk, you can't get to work if you've got those with you every day. You can't feed the kids. So these are quite powerful feelings, so they have to go somewhere. And the awakening to these feelings can be gradual, or it can be traumatic, and I meet people with both. My awakening happened to be traumatic, where I went into deep depression for about a month when I realised how bad things were. But it can be gradual. But all the same, these feelings have to go somewhere. We have to do something with them, but sometimes we can't speak them. So we unconsciously defend ourselves against it. So we can create that as-if world. And so we use defences. They're like little shock absorbers for the truth. They're like rough exteriors to protect the soft interior. Denial, it's not happening. Disavowal, well, I think it's happening, but I'm going to pretend it's not. Distancing, oh, it's not me, it's over there, it's 50 years away, it's 200 years away. Blame, it's not my fault, it's blame the Chinese. Entitlement, well, I work hard, so I deserve my little luxuries. I'm special, it won't happen to me, I'll be fine, I can drive through the floods, I can weather the storms. This is just all too much, so I'm going to do something else instead and keep busy. And it's not that bad. People are saying it's really bad, but no, it's not that bad. Tech will solve it. There are loads and loads more defences. Oh, my light's been playing up. Excuse me, I'm just going to turn it off. Put the other one on. It's all right. It's not climate crisis causing this. So these are fairly standard psychological defences that are probably at play. And something I think is really important for you to know about. I'm just aware of the time. We started 10 minutes late, so I might be going on a little longer over that period. So socially constructed silence is something very important, I think, for us to be potentially aware of. It's a collective defence. Something's difficult to think about. It's not talked about, so we can't cope with it, so we don't talk about it. So there's an unspoken agreement. You don't walk in the office and say, "Hi, how's the people feeling about climate change today?" Much as with any other social taboo. But even thinking about it becomes normal, so we can continue avoiding it indefinitely. People are afraid to violate that silence. You'd get frowned on if you walked into a pub or your workplace and said, "God, isn't the climate change awful?" Someone's going to change the subject really quickly. And it's more than a taboo, though, because it's potentially harmful. It can lead to a false reality, to this as-if world. And particularly for those who are really struggling with the idea of their future, it can lead them to feel really isolated. You know, I keep hearing young people say, "Why aren't you all talking about it?" And it's, by the way, it's not just young people saying this, it's older people too. Why aren't we all talking about it? Why aren't we doing something? So Sally Weintraub, a psychoanalyst who's worked on the psychological roots of the climate crisis, says the climate bubble of denial is now bursting. It's served to maintain white privilege and exceptionalism, and it's been promoting a culture of uncaring. We've got caring and uncaring parts in all of us, but it's really allowed that uncaring part to show up and kind of ignore things and carry on. And it's boosted omnipotent wishful thinking and attacking reality-based thinking. It's a wonderful book, even though she's a psychoanalyst and you don't need to be one to read the psychological roots of the climate crisis. So anxiety and distress are often responses to emerging from this bubble of defensive states. Whether you're older or you're younger, you're emerging in some way from defensive states, or you may well have grown up with this knowledge. And you can see some quite young children here in this picture, growing up with the knowledge. When you see what's on their posters, it's quite shocking, really, that young people are having to say this. The earth is dying, so let's keep trying. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I'm not fine. It's just staggering, really, when you think about it. So what about you? Are you anxious and distressed, or do you try not to think about it? Many of us do try not to think about it. It's completely understandable. But do you have someone to talk to? Do you have colleagues or close friends, or do you go somewhere to talk? And are you able to really listen to your children about their feelings? It can be really hard to know how to respond to them or what to say. And yet we know that it makes their anxiety much worse if they feel dismissed or ridiculed or diminished in some way. Are you seeing colleagues about it at work, or hearing colleagues expressing concern? Do you get data through things like EAPs, occupational health? And if you're not hearing people express concern, why might that be? What's going on there? And where does mental well-being sit within your current organisational priorities? And how equipped is your organisation to help staff to deal with their own and others' anxieties around this? Because this ain't going away. This isn't a COVID that has been and gone. This is not going away. So how can your organisation actually put in place things that can help? So now I'm just going to just mention the spiral journey of the work that reconnects. This is my own language. The work that reconnects uses slightly different words, such as coming from gratitude. I use appreciation. So we can take ourselves and others on a journey, on a regular journey that helps us to build our own capacity to rise to these challenges. And the research all shows that when you can build yourself a foundation of appreciating what's good and what's already working and what's there, we're much more likely to be able to rise to challenges. When we can do that, we see new perspectives. We begin to see the world as it really is. We are much prepared to see the fallacy of business as usual. And then we can take action. And this is a regular spiral. You can keep going. You can go round and round. You don't go downwards in this spiral, but you can start with different places. But we're always starting with appreciation. You can come back, and even a daily practice of saying, what am I happy for today? What's going well today? What are the challenges the world is facing? What's going on here? And so there's some strategies. The first strategy is to find ways to talk about feelings. That's whether individual or collective. Start from gratitude, find ways to share feelings, listen to others and not diminish them. Accept and value all emotions and responses, whether that's indifference, because that's just a defence at play, whether that's even bloody-mindedness, it's probably still a defence, and see that people take things differently and they respond differently in different ways, different days. Acknowledge and grieve for losses. We need to find ways to make it possible to acknowledge and grieve. And we need also to accept there is uncertainty here and complexity in our journey. There is no quick magic techno fix. And we need to accept that we're all on a journey and it's not always going to go well. And really importantly is, if you have young people in your life, is learn how to talk and listen to them about climate change. So that's our first resilience strategy, is find ways to talk about feelings. Because if you said to a group of people, no one's talking about climate change, they're going to say, yeah, we are, we're talking about it. They're not really talking about it. They're talking about solutions and fixes. They're not talking about the lack of connection with our world. They're not talking about what's being lost. They're not talking about feelings. Second strategy is cultivate new thinking in yourself. Balance that ratio of being informed and doom scrolling. Don't get too much into doom scrolling, but try not to get too news avoidant. And it's a hard one to follow. I can easily sometimes get into doom scrolling. Create times for climate engagement and time for rest. We need to find ways to manage our energy. So make sure that you've put aside time to go and enjoy something and then to get engaged. And look out, who else is making changes? Who's doing inspiring things? That'll give you new thinking to learn from others' new thinking. Pace your own changes. You don't have to do it all overnight. It's not going to be possible. So build bridges to new ways. If I said to you now, you've got to stop driving, you've got to stop this, stop that, stop that, stop that, you're going to go, no, I don't even know where to start. So pace your changes, but take them seriously. Doesn't mean letting yourself off the hook. Is again that balance. See things as they really are. Start noticing as if it's everywhere. It's on the news, it's where there's an advert for something that's luxurious and carbon consumption is off the roof next to some kind of other luxury of life. I saw one the other day which was a weather thing talking about extreme weather and floods and famines and stuff, and then on the right hand side of the page online was a flight to Dubai for £9 from London. Start seeing the push, the pulls, start seeing the greenwashing. And find meaning and purpose through deeper understanding of what needs to change. I've fallen back in love with nature. I've been reading books about plant intelligence and those kind of things. That's the second strategy, is cultivate new thinking. And these are personal strategies, by the way, that can be applied to organisations, and I'll come on to organisations in a moment. Third strategy for resilience is connect and reconnect. Really importantly, create communities and what we call cultures of care. Cultures of care where people are cared for, where you can sit together and eat together and build community together, both at work and at home. And one way that lots of organisations are doing this with the Climate Psychology Alliance is through things like listening circles. So we provide listening circle training in-house to people. Create these communities where people do care and make the normalisation of emotions, feelings normal. Spend time with people who are engaged with it. It's massively inspiring to be around people who are putting energy into this rather than people who are just avoiding it. Nurture personal practices of self-care. Whatever those things are you normally do, don't drop them now. Keep them going, whether it's being out in the rest of nature, whether it's yoga, those kind of things, because you need to be resilient. That doesn't mean it's indulgent, it's just a way of making sure that you're able to do the work that needs to be done. So part of that, connect regularly with nature and people around the world, find out what's going on around the world. We are all connected, we're all on the same planet. Find out about them. That when you find out about what's happening in other places, it can spur you on. You can choose to be helpless, or you can choose to be overwhelmed, or you can choose to say, actually, this is happening over there. I'm going to do what I can over here to make a difference. Participate in any kind of action, whether it is taking part in marches, doing local community events, whether it's gluing yourself to the street or going to jail, doesn't really matter. Any kind of activism is a massive help for people, and if you've got young people in your life who want to get involved in activism, I would encourage you to listen to why they want to do that rather than saying, don't do that, just mad people do that. It's been a lifesaver for many young people I've encountered. Exercise your body. You need to be fit and strong, and it'll keep you resilient. And also, if you've got some hobbies that you stopped doing years ago, art, painting, music, it's really important to nurture those aspects of ourselves that we might have lost touch with in the rush of business as usual. I'm nearly at the end. Organisational strategies. Talk about climate feelings as well as climate actions. Create spaces to share and listen, like climate cafe listening circles, work that reconnects workshops, those kind of things. Ensure your leaders themselves are engaged and supported. They're carrying a lot of burden, a lot of expectations. Talk with staff about what the organisation's doing and how they can get involved, get people involved, understanding that if they're indifferent, it's because they're in a state of fear, often. Champion initiatives in your community, get behind them. Don't do everything you can to oil the wheels. If you've got a local group that wants to do something and you're in a position in the council you can make it happen, oil the wheels where you can. And be massively aware of the seductive lure of business as usual. Call it out. No, we're not doing that anymore. And consider the resilient strategies I suggested. Can you do more in your organisation? There's some books. Mine's in the middle. I wrote a book, I edited a book called Holding the Hope, Reviving Psychological and Spiritual Agency. And there's a book there, particularly for young people, called Generation Dread by Britt Ray, which is fabulous. So I'll share this with you. And there's some information. Go to my website. You can contact me. At the Climate Psychology Alliance, we do listening circle and facilitator training. We have a therapeutic support directory, and we hold spaces for youth and parents. So go to the website or contact me to discuss, and I'll put you in touch with the right people. We're a volunteer organisation. There's only really 5 of us at the heart of it, and the rest are different groups. And then you can find lots of resources for climate education. Have a look at Thought Box Education. And then there's resources for talking to young people. And connect with me. And so we've got time for questions. I'll stop the share.
Linda, thank you very much for that petrifying, horrifying, frightening sort of presentation, because the numbers that you were mentioning were rather alien to me. But the one question that I came up with was an earlier comment of yours, which said that there are people who really get upset by those who don't get it. So could you tell me what sort of proportion of people don't get it? How many, as a world sort of percentage, are not paying any attention to climate change, not even believing in it?
It's going down. I don't know the proportions, and it's different across the world because if you've lived in a flooded community in the Philippines, you get it. Um, yeah.
Yes.
It's also interestingly in the USA, there's been a political division for many years. It's been used as a political tool. Um, it's very hard to say who gets it because of the unconscious processes that stop people looking at it. Very hard indeed. So someone might say, I don't believe in climate change, but actually you say, what do you mean? Which bit of climate change do you not believe in? So that feeling of getting it is when someone says, I don't understand it, but I can see how you feel about it. I can understand that you feel petrified.
Right. Thank you.
Kari, thank you. Is that yeah, so not specific, but I hope it's helpful. Kara, did you have a question?
So many, but I'm afraid I have to go soon to another meeting. I'm just interested about the young people. It always really knocks me off because what is the age of being young? There's lots of people in my age, mid-40s, who feel very similar. And it's about environmentalists we're not listened to. So why is that? I think there is an inherent, I suppose, in-depth, deep response to climate change. In fact, the fear just makes people not want to deal with it because it's so huge. So it's better to deny than deal with it. And it's just very frightening that we're at this point and we're seeing, whether it's political or financial changes, the climate environment always gets kind of ditched. So I really don't know how we're going to be able to change that. It's interesting, in a community that has been frequently flooded, it still hasn't really embedded enough to realise that we need to do something urgent to adapt to it as much as also reduce our impact. So I'm afraid I'm not very helpful, really. I think the listening bit's really important. I think we need to spend more time engaging with all kinds of different people to understand what their fears are and how we can help kind of link that. But also the positives. There's a lot more discussion around how do we look at more creative ways of thinking and aspire to a healthy future that, of course, inherently is going to be more sustainable, more green, decarbonised, but without using any of those words. It's interesting when you do that kind of future visioning workshops with people, what they bring out along those lines that meets that. So that's another way of approaching it. But thanks for your information, and I shall look at some of that links that you'll send around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much work. There's lots and lots of models I could share as well around that. One thing I would say is that there is it's understandable to have the kind of fantasy that now when the weather gets worse and when more people get flooded, they will get it. Actually, it's probably not that likely because there will be more defences at play. So the more we see reality unfolding, the more people will build up defences. But we don't have that many, we don't have massive numbers of massive climate deniers. But we still do have people who use defences to say, well, for example, people who've had their homes burnt in fires and have rebuilt their homes or have escaped near death are much harder to get evacuated by local officers who are trying to evacuate areas because people believe that there is a defence that kicks in called exceptionalism. And that's, well, I survived the last time, so we'll survive this one as well, because it won't happen to me because I'm special. Any other questions or thoughts? Rick?
Can you hear me all right? I'm not
Yes,
sure.
I can.
Thank you. I was going to challenge that thing, and it leads a bit from what you said about the more people who get flooded, the more people will believe this. Because my understanding was that actually people who've been affected by floods or affected by fires are actually less likely to, well, they're more likely to deny the climate things. They're more likely to focus on what the community response was and that, the next, I gather when people if they get insurance for payouts for flood damage, they're likely to spend it on new refrigerators rather than trying to protect their home from floods because they believe it won't happen to them again. And
that's just what I said. Yeah, that's just exactly what I said. Yeah, they're more likely to believe because they survived it, they'll be okay. Yeah.
So as the climate crisis worsens, it worries me that people actually that climate denialism will actually paradoxically increase rather than decrease.
Yeah, that's. I'm sorry if I didn't make that. That's exactly what I'm sort of hinting at. Is there's a chance that it will get more. And the number of people that go on flights, but more. I'm not saying flying is completely evil, but we know it's one of the things that could have a very big impact for in each individual's life. You know, it takes up so much of our annual sort of carbon budget. And so when people see these extreme weather events, I've just had lots of messages in the last month from people saying, "Oh, I can't stand this rain over here. I'm getting on a plane." And they're not adding those dots. They're not seeing that perspective. So that's a form of denialism because it's a natural retreat to a place of comfort. You know, I'm not saying people are evil, by the way. This is a place of comfort that people are going to.
And can I just ask about that flight thing? Because I've announced to everybody that I'm never going to fly again unless it's an emergency. And that just seems to create a certain amount of resentment. It's like me saying how good I am and how bad everybody else is. And they sort of, family people actually avoid telling me about their holidays because they know how much I disapprove of them having flown to Crete, for example. And that's actually another area where I find it very difficult to talk about climate issues. Yeah,
absolutely. You're so not alone there, so not alone. And that flying seems to be something that really distresses. Certainly, yeah, I'm with you on flight free. But yeah, it does distress a lot of people. Michelle, you have a thought or an observation or a question, and then Stuart.
Yeah, I've been sort of working in my local community for about 10 years and have taken the work that reconnects courses and have been a member of many listening groups. And I am really struggling. I have been struggling anyway, but the news this morning has just completely poleaxed me to find any hope or comfort. And your presentation, of course, I related to it and what Stuart said and what the other gentleman whose name I didn't catch has just said. I relate to all these things so intensely. Rick, sorry, you're still on my screen. So what Rick said. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. But how do I pick myself up again? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm in despair. Yeah. And all the things that I would like to do in my community, it's still only the same people that are coming along. And believe me, I talk to everyone. I'm super friendly. Everyone, you know, it's not like they don't want to talk to me, but they don't want to do anything. And people have said to me, I don't want to talk about climate change because it's too depressing. But thank you for what you're doing. Well, I can't do it anymore. I'm under the heel now. So somebody else is going to have to, and they're not. So I just, sorry. I just really.
Oh, please don't apologize. I'm absolutely hearing every word. Jennifer, was there anything you wanted to say about Trump? I think you popped something in the chat. I wonder if there's anything you want to say.
I don't know really what I can say, but I'm definitely grieving, and I really feel for you, Michelle. I don't know what to say. I've kind of hit the bottom, but actually, you know, sometimes we have to go through these things, and I think that it just means we have to try harder. We have to fight harder. We have to. Maya Angelou said that basically there isn't enough space for both fear and hope. So invite one to stay. And so I'm inviting hope to stay today and forever, because I can't change some of these things that have happened. I did vote. I had my son vote, but it's been taken out of my hands. So I can only change what I can influence immediately around me. And that's what I'm going to carry on doing. And I totally get what you're saying about people not coming forward, because you know, I work in water quality things, and I went down to the March for Clean Water on Sunday, and you know, there was a lot of people that I wish, you know, had have been there that weren't. But I did the best that I could. I ran around as a giant turd and blew kisses to people and kept it lighthearted, because it was so full of people that were passionate. And you know, there were loads of people that couldn't be there for various reasons. But I think that there were many more there in spirit, and we can make that change. So I think we just have to, you know, try and rise up again and harder.
Absolutely, and still I rise. Yeah. I'll come to you in a second, Stuart. Just want to really just as also address both of that and Michelle's point. I got up a couple of weeks ago, just feeling one of those days of dread, absolute dread. You know, what is the point? It's going to be really tough. What is the point? You know, who am I, little me, doing nothing, and all of that. And then I was quite tearful, and I walked into the kitchen, and I've got glass doors at the back, and I could see that the bird feeder was empty. And I thought, oh, well, the birds still need feeding today. And that I kind of kept thinking that all the day. What can I do? It's only my backyard, but the birds still need feeding. Stuart, how about you?
I'd just like to say thank you for a fantastic presentation. Two books that I've personally found helpful. One was Not the End of the World by Hannah Ritchie, and she puts a different slant onto all the evil things that are happening. One of the things she points to is palm oil, and I think Chester is the first town or city in this country to completely ban palm oil. Yet Hannah says, actually, palm oil is not that bad. It's very good at what it does. The trees are very productive. We've just got to manage them better. So don't have acres and acres of monoculture, intersperse the trees with this, that, and the other. But certainly don't give up palm oil, which I thought was a nice way of looking at things. And the other book I found helpful was How to Talk About Climate Change by Rebecca Huntley. And again, she puts the emphasis on, if we do tackle climate change, all the co-benefits that go with it. So fewer people dying from lung disease, fewer people dying from hypothermia, less crop damage from floods, etc., etc. So emphasize the positives of doing something rather than the doom and gloom sort of negatives.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is a worldwide problem. It's affecting every living thing on the planet, and we know it is going to get worse. It's difficult to adjust to the psychology of that, I find.
It is. And we go in and out, don't we? In and out feeling differently about it. And yes, and there's a balance to be struck between hopium, which is this passive kind of, oh, it'll all turn out fine, I'll just take another little dose of hope, versus actively doing something and getting actively engaged. And using your body physically is also so important. To use your mind is one thing, but to use your body to get out there, to clean the rivers, to go on the marches, all those kind of things. We are embodied creatures, and we've forgotten that, really. We're the only animals that have forgotten we're animals, really. So we sit at desks all day long and use our brains, but actually it's so important to connect with all of us.
I will just add that I did feel like the bird feeder outside my window, and there are 5 blue tits on it now.
Well, there you
and
go.
The woodpecker.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions?
Well, yes, I should have said right at the start, thank you for a really, really interesting talk and your presentation. I found it really helpful, so thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
One point I wondered if you could say a little bit more about is disavowal, because I don't fully understand that.
Yeah, surely. So disavowal is thought to be it's a sort of watered down form of denial. Denial is when you're rock solid, convinced yourself that this isn't true, this isn't happening, and you will even go as far as paying people, lobbyists, to prove it's not true. And so it can be often a manipulation. Disavowal is that state of the capacity. We've all got different parts of ourselves. And it's a state of actually living with 2 parts together and the tension of that. So a bit of me knows and a bit of me doesn't want to know. So I'll give an example. Last year I went into Shipston and a beautiful summer day, and I'd just come out of a very intense climate emotions meeting with some young people, and I thought, oh, I need to go and get some fresh air. And so I was probably in a heightened state, walked around the market square, and there's a shop in the market square, a woman's clothes shop, and I saw a dress in the window, and I thought, oh, do you know, that's really nice. I think I'll go and get that. I think I'll go and try that on. And as I walked in the door, I just thought, Linda, you've got 3 linen dresses you don't wear already. This isn't going to make you feel any better. Stop business as usual. So it's that knowing that bit, and also disavowal is also it can also be associated with cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is because climate psychology doesn't really use much traditional psychology. We're much more interested in the unconscious life, and the psychosocial processes and the arts and all of the spiritual aspects of it. Psychology is much more traditional with measurement, but cognitive dissonance is where you know something isn't quite right because it's not matching up to how you think you should look or be, but you're kind of doing it anyway. So, for example, somebody might say, well, you know, I feel bad about flying. So they'll use one of 3 strategies to manage the dissonance, the uncomfortableness. So that can also be a sort of manifestation of disavowal. So those 3 strategies tend to be, you change the story. So you say, well, there's nothing wrong with flying. It's not true. It's all or you say, well, I only fly now and then. So you're minimizing it. Or I can't remember the 3rd strategy now, but we use various strategies. So disavowal is knowing and not knowing at the same time.
Could the 3rd strategy be to actually change?
Yes, that's it. Thank you. That's it. That's the one. Yeah. To change your behaviour so you reduce the dissonance. Yeah. So, but I would say that, and our work seems to show that, you know, climate denialism, outright denialism, is quite rare, but disavowal is the state that we're living in. So disavowal is kind of everywhere. It's about this socially constructed silence. Is don't talk about it, don't even think about it, because it's just a bit uncomfortable, and we can't do anything anyway, kind of thing. But it's not. It's a shared collective silence, and it is. It's a social taboo. We've encountered social taboos before, haven't we?
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
I'm really interested in your opening where you said all the different work you're doing. So to build my spirits up, could you just talk about a couple of good examples of where you've gone in to help organisations, and then that would maybe certainly lift my spirits.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, well, I do quite a lot of them. One of the things that I do is with the Climate Psychology Alliance is I go in with colleagues and we run climate cafe listening circles. And these are often for people who are working in frontline roles in the environment, and they're not really talking much about it. They're sort of skirting the issue because they're too busy with day-to-day work. So we create a container. We have a listening circle where each person has a turn to talk about how they're feeling right now about what's going on, about climate. And there's no comment, there's no conversation, it's just a sharing space. Everyone has a turn to speak. And the word that comes up again and again is relief. And I've also run these online, and we have people from all over the world who've never met anybody before. And I met this guy in Wisconsin who said, in a village, in a little kind of outstate place in Wisconsin. He said, I'm the only guy in the whole town that is worried about this. And I'm the kind of nutter in the town. He said, I can't tell you how great it is to come to a group of complete strangers and talk about how I feel. And what that seems to do for people is first validate their concerns, because nobody likes to be told you're talking nonsense. Secondly, the expression of and the release of their feelings, and it's not all gushingly emotional, by the way. It's not overwhelming. It's just a space you can say what you think. You can kind of talk about your worst fears as well. Is that relief then leads people, and although they're not action-oriented spaces at all, there are lots of climate cafes that are, but our listening circles are just feeling spaces. They say, I feel better now. and I'm going to go and feed the birds, or I'm going to go and join that march, or I'm going to do something. And it seems that when you're suppressing how you feel about it, you're also suppressing your creativity and your imagination.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Linda, that was fascinating. Thank you so much for coming. Let me inspire everybody by saying that you're coming back in a month's time, and that people should be ready for your next session, whatever that's going to cover.
Yeah.
But very, very grateful for your coming today, and such an eye-opening presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for being here, and yeah, for your attention. I'll send some stuff around. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or just look at aspey.com. You'll find my website, and I can direct you to various resources as well.
Thank you so much. Take care. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.